Hi, everyone. Welcome to our November session of Dynamic Dialogue Supply Chain. As most of you know, this is a monthly event, and I want to thank everybody for being here because this is a week to thank everybody, right? Uh, Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for joining me today. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. This is the last webinar of 2024, as the fourth Tuesday in December is Christmas Eve. And I don't think that's very good timing for any of us. So I'll wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year. Overall, a beautiful and safe holiday season. And I look forward to seeing many of you in January. So I am going to turn off my video and all the video so we can do away with that and just kind of jump into this skill session. So I'm going to talk a little bit about skills, what's going on with the industry, with supply chain professionals, and just kind of overall. So as some of you know, this is our format. We do the fourth Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I open it up for thoughts, ideas, challenges. I'm always looking for ideas for upcoming webinars. So if you have a topic that you're interested in, you can always shoot me an email and I'll give you an email. You can use the info@purplelink.co, or I'll give you another email at the end. We keep this to a short presentation, less than an hour. The link that you use today is good through 2025. If you signed up and registered, that's great. And if you didn't, that's okay too, because you'll still probably get updates
Yeah,
from me.
yeah,
If you register, then you do get um, the link to the YouTube, but it's the channel is open and free. So if you have the YouTube link or just look for my name or purple link under YouTube, you'll be able to find it. So let's jump into the topic today. We're going to talk about business challenges. I'm going to talk about the skills that are needed, some of the gaps that we're seeing, and then what you can do about them. So let's just kind of jump into the business challenges. Um, so this is from a 2023 survey, and I'm just kind of throwing it out there as a baseline. At that point in time, they were saying 50% of the senior executives acknowledged that there was a talent shortage in supply chain. 64% said the top challenge in attracting new talent was lack of the appropriate skill set. And these are really hard skill sets to define a lot of times. And they wanted people who could tackle this unprecedented um, challenges and rapidly changing landscapes. And I got to tell you, if this is what they thought at the end of 2023 when this survey was done, not much has changed. It's pretty much the same kind of thing. There's a lot of complexity, as we know, looking at technology, sustainability, all those kinds of things. Oops. So there's a lot of change, but a lot of things are staying the same. And the the hiring managers, the businesses are saying that the talent in the pool that's available is not necessarily meeting up to the business requirements. And we all know that the unemployment rate is very low, which is a really good thing, especially if you're looking for a job. That usually makes you more attractive because you're looking for jobs that there's not a lot of people unemployed. So there's not a lot of competition looking for jobs. And that you should be able to find jobs in that kind of environment. But we're seeing that people are struggling because of this whole talent mismatch kind of thing. So this is the same survey again from about a year ago that says that the changes in geopolitical trade policies, customs regulations, that was one of the two biggest challenges along with inflation. So today, I don't think inflation is going to make the top five because we've seen inflation come down, although there's a big risk of inflation going back. And these geopolitical trade tariff issues are making some people very, very nervous and some businesses nervous. So those are still big issues. and maybe inflation makes the top five. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything that puts it right up there. But talent shortage, again, 50%. Again, this was a year ago. So finding the right skill sets was the biggest challenge. 64% said they couldn't find talent with the right skill sets. Data analytics was a big shortfall. I think it's still going to be a big shortfall because not a lot of people have picked up a lot of expertise in data analytics over the last year. That's not to say no one has, and that is an area that some universities, including where I teach at Cal State Northridge, they're offering now a major in data analytics, and people are picking up some additional skills, but that's a hard gap to fill in just a year. So I think that's still going to be a gap. And it's not just data analytics, it's going to be more of machine learning and AI and a lot of different things in there. So a reduction in time to hire. Companies want to hire when they've got the budget as quickly as possible. Retention of talent is a big deal, and lack of diversity in the talent pool. People still want some diversity in their workforce, and so that's a good thing to bring in. So this is where I did a little research. So hopefully I did some research so you won't have to. I've compiled a list of challenges from several different sources and several different, um, mostly articles that were available talking about 2025 and skills and supply chain. I really took a lot of charts from one particular article that was released by the Supply Chain Management um, magazine article organization and one called Skill Dynamics. There's a lot going on, a lot of speculation after the election earlier this month, and there's just lots and lots of unknowns. And then, of course, we don't know what we don't know. So there's a lot of things that could happen and a lot of people thinking and projecting and whatever, and only time will tell with a lot of that. But I want to share with you because these are things I've been contemplating and looking at for myself, for my clients, for my students. And I think issues that could be considered in most organizations, not only now and in the short term, but for the midterm kind of future. And that's, I'll just go through these pretty quick. The whole trade, tariffs, trade wars, route disruptions, lots of things going on in that arena, lots of potential there. Climate and climate change. You can talk a lot about climate and climate change and whether you agree with it or not. But what's happening is we're seeing a lot of impacts from weather, like hurricanes and floods. There's a lot of flooding in Spain. There were these bad hurricanes in Florida and North Carolina earlier this year. And they're pretty severe, and there's more things coming, more things on the horizon. They're shutting down parts of the UK this week, actually, for potential storms coming through there. So lots of things going on with that are natural disaster weather related. Supply chain architectures, nearshoring, onshoring, friendshoring, reshoring. You know, do we stay? Do we go? Do we do this? Do we do that? None of that is easy to change, and none of that is inexpensive to change. It costs money to move things from place to place. So but there's a lot of consideration about that, and we'll have to see how that plays out. There's a couple of things that have to do with the workforce. One is just workforce management in supply chain, which has to do with getting the right talent, the right head count, filling these key positions, especially when it comes to things like import, export, logistics, planners, whatever your position is, every company has some challenges in that area. And then overall in the supply chain workforce, what we're seeing is a lot of issues around labor unions, different types of work stoppages. We've seen that over the last year. Union issues, automation coming in. How much automation is good? How much is not? Labor unions, do they strike? Do they not? Do they unionize in some areas? There's still a lot of um, places where there are not unions and unions are trying to get workers to unionize. That's been going on for a while, but I think that's going to continue. The skill gaps, again, machine learning, AI, data analytics, a lot of things there, as well as more standard things that we'll take a look at in a couple minutes. Supplier relationships and supplier performance, always a strain, making sure that you have the right suppliers, that you keep the relationship strong with them, that you are managing their performance and that they're not causing disruptions and problems in your workspace. So looking at that and making your customers unhappy, which makes everybody in the middle unhappy. Inventory management, this is another one. There's a lot of things going on with inventory management. So many things come from Asia, and companies are looking at the tariff impacts. Do we go buy a bunch of stuff as quickly as we can and risk adding to our inventory, which always freaks the finance people out when you start increasing the inventory balances? But do we do that before these tariffs can get actually enacted? Do we wait and see? How are we going to deal with that? So there's a lot of things going on. And at the same time, there are still parts that are understocked and lead times are growing longer and making it more difficult. And so companies are juggling all of this. A lot of risk management, again, surprises. Companies are trying to put contingency plans in place. They're trying to do more proactive risk analysis and do risk-based decision making, but it's still, a bit of rolling the dice and seeing what happens. And then there's a lot of issues around communication and collaboration, and a lot of things in that area, what that means to a company and how they're going to move forward in that space. So here's some of these business conditions. Again, this is the skills report that I talked about. It's skills report 2025, skill dynamics, with published jointly with the supply chain management review. So they talk about they ask these executives, and these are supply chain executives, operational, and just overall CEO types. What is the most significant issue facing your function? And they let them select up to 5 different things. And you can see, sorry, the print is kind of small, but 63% say making cost savings, um, and making their cost savings goals. I see Dennis, thumbs up. I think that means it resonates with you, that you're seeing the same thing. There's always been pressure in supply chain to get cost savings. I don't think that's changing. 63% say that is at least one of the top 5 significant issues, and 63% of the responders picked that. So there's a lot of pressure on supply chain people in the next year to get cost reductions. That's not really a change, but that means there's no let up of that pressure. Skills shortage, 46%, number 2. So a lack of people with necessary skills. This is a big deal in the supply chain profession, and companies are looking very hard for people with the right kinds of skills. And part of that, it's no surprise then that recruitment is 38%. It was the third most significant issue facing this function, because if you've got skill shortages, it's hard to recruit. And if you're not doing a good job recruiting, then you're not targeting the right skills and you might not be bringing them on board. So you kind of a chicken and egg thing. Which one needs to get fixed first? And how do you fix that? And how do you go about that? Visibility across the supply chain. This is an area where a lot of companies are struggling. They were struggling before just getting a look at the detailed architecture that they have. Where are their suppliers? Which not only their immediate suppliers, but their tier 2 and tier 3, those critical suppliers. Now that they know where they are, it's maintaining that visibility as companies say, oh, we might move this. Let's try to move things out of China, or maybe we're going to dual source and we'll buy from China and we'll buy from somebody else because it makes more sense to do that. This resilience, continuity, agility, flexibility, all of those things to be able to react and even avoid some of the supply disruptions that have plagued companies in the last few years. We learned a lot from the pandemic, but we learned that we don't know a lot. and we are looking at how we can continue to prevent disruptions and or when they do happen, that we can minimize them, react very quickly, and get back on board. That's the resilience piece. How fast can we recover from those? Even though, and maybe because of that, unemployment rates are low, there's a lot of employee churn, and I've got a couple interesting charts on that. Technological advancements, again, AI and things like that, that people say, oh yeah, that's great. How do I use it? Some companies are afraid that they're not adopting it fast enough. But it's not kind of a plug and play thing that you say, oh yeah, go get that new software that's going to let you do ABC and XYZ real quick. It's confusing, and it needs to be applied carefully, and it still needs to be overseen and looked at by a human, because you can't just take everything that it spits out and say this is all wonderful. Geopolitical stuff that could get higher in the next few months. We'll have to see. Um, ESG, the sustainability, environmental kinds of things, governance is always a big deal. Tapping into supplier innovation was up there, and then, of course, another couple things. I think it's interesting. 1% said, I don't see any significant issues facing our function. I'd like to know who that is, because I can't imagine that somebody can say that with a straight face, but apparently somebody did. So we've got all of these things that these executives think, and then here's what they ask a lot of these same participants. They said, "What, if any, of these following statements apply to you?" And the biggest one, the biggest response was, "My team is being expected to deliver more with fewer people." This is not a new phenomena in business, but this is, I think, where people are feeling pressure even more, with, do more with fewer people. So we're always trying to do things faster, better, cheaper, right? I think that's what we're seeing here as well. And people are feeling that as a pressure, that we are not getting any relief in what we're supposed to deliver in the workplace. And yet we don't have as many people. We aren't able to add positions that we were maybe able to add before. I see companies that have attrition and are not replacing people. So it's tough. And at the same time, 40% of the people said they're trying to grow their team. So it may be an issue of attrition that they are trying to replace. So they're trying to add people at the same time that they're losing people, or they're being pushed to do it with fewer people, but the middle manager maybe is trying to grow the team where they're trying to trim the budgets and do things. So I don't know how all that works out. These are just numbers from the survey, but it's interesting to see how they align and how they contradict in some cases. The number three one was that people are concerned that the high levels of employee churn at the lower levels of an organization are preventing skill development. And we're seeing churn, and I didn't see a lot of mention, but I did see it mentioned a couple of times. The whole return to work and work in the office versus work from home, the hybrid work schedules, and there's a lot of pressure from certain executives saying get back in the office 100% of the time, and employees are saying, nope, that doesn't work for me. So people are leaving jobs for that, looking for jobs. And, with a quiet quitting, which I think is still going on, but people are looking for some flexibility and some balance in their work life. And that isn't always readily available. And companies are going back and forth with that. So, here's 30% of the people are trying to just maintain the size of their team. That sounds to me like they are experiencing attrition, and they are trying to just backfill what they can. And when the pool of potential employees is not great, then it's harder to find the skills that you really want. They spot mistakes employees have made after they left the organization. Organizations consciously offer higher salaries to attract people. So when you see that, and when people see people getting hired at higher salaries than they're making, that makes people start to look more, and it's can be a kind of a do loop there. So, and then some people are trying to reduce headcount. I saw, I think today that LinkedIn is reducing headcount, so a lot of things going on with a lot of different types of workers. And 7% said none of these really apply to me. So that was interesting too. Retention challenges. So companies that have retention issues, which is more and more companies, I think. They said, which of these apply? 21% said that high turnover is a problem. Again, I don't know how much that's related to like work from home policies versus getting another job somewhere else, trying to make more money, uh, whatever the reasons are for looking for different positions. But that's what they're seeing. Employee retention has decreased in my function over the last 3 years. So retention again decreased, even though the unemployment's been low. And of course, when the unemployment is low, then people can get jobs more readily. So they are looking and they are finding other place. 14% said they are planning to leave their role within the organization in the near future, but 55% said none of these apply. So I wonder if this 55% is fooling themselves and they are going to be surprised by some of these things that, there's turnover coming, or maybe I don't know. So let's look at some skills themselves when we talk about the talent pool and not having the right skills. This is from February of this year, and this talks about some of the supply chain skills, operational skills. So, supply chain itself, almost 20%, logistics, always in demand, and even more so with more and more trade and issues going on. Almost 10%, project management, 5%, customer service, chain management, smaller numbers, and then another 47%. But those top three, supply chain, logistics, and project management, I guess, along with customer service. Not really a big surprise there. Again, that was from February, but it doesn't seem like much has changed since then. It's a different organization than did this study. So this says, what skills do you look for in perspective? And this is particular to procurement professionals. So there were some studies that did supply chain and some that did procurement. This was a particular procurement. And it's interesting. The number one thing they're looking for is interpersonal skills. So when you think about why didn't I get hired, that's one of the easier things to practice, polish, do better at, try to perform well in an interview with interpersonal skills. But that's when they say they're looking for 62%. Contract and supplier management, 46%. So some of these are what I would call hard skills and appear related to having some experience in these areas. Contract management is one, contract supplier management, finance cost management, legal and regulatory, project or category management. And then there are a few soft skills kind of woven in there, like interpersonal skills, persuasion and influence. And then there's some technology skills, like this digital procurement kind of thing that's in there. So these are the ones that they say they're looking for in new procurement hires, new procurement professionals to come in with by far interpersonal skills leading the pack. Now, I'm going to contrast that with this study that was done about the time of the pandemic. It was the very end of 2019 this was done. So it's hard for me to think that that was 5 years ago, but it was. And here's what was at the top. Business ethics was number one on these executives list. It was a similar list of sourcing and procurement. So it's a very kind of apples to apples comparison. Business ethics, number one, communication, oral and written, which does align pretty well with the interpersonal skills. So that was high then, just stated a little differently, but it seems like they're highly related. Stakeholder management, which is very much akin to relationship building and management, persuasion, influence, those kinds of things. Critical thinking, which doesn't appear to be on the other list. Leadership, decision making, negotiating, and being a team player. These were the top 10 out of that list. And so it's interesting to look at 5 years apart. There's some very common themes and there's some different ones, but different survey could have been a whole different set of questions asked. And you wonder, if they took those things into account. What do you look for in a supply chain team member? Again, 75% of people said interpersonal skills. Then quality and process improvement. So having this understanding of basic quality concepts and quality management, quality control, this is what people are looking for when they hire. They want people who understand at least some of that language. Transportation and logistics, not a surprise that this is a number 3 on the list with 64%, because there are so many potential changes in what's going on with import export, these tariffs that might get increased and applied more broadly, companies looking to move their products, some of the issues between Taiwan and China, all kinds of different geopolitical things with transportation and logistics. But here's number 4, 54% digital analytic skills. So this is something that companies are looking at. Inventory control, which in my mind is highly correlated to digital and analytic skills, because one way you manage inventory is through analysis and looking at the digital changes in inventory over time. Demand planning, again, heavily related to digital analytic skills. Warehousing by itself, production, less there, but still 25%, a significant percent of people are looking for people who understand a little bit about manufacturing. Legal regulatory, which I'm surprised is only 19%, because this is always an area where companies run risk and have to stay very diligent. Then financial sustainability and others. So it's an interesting kind of list there. So when we look at this, we look at gaps and we say, okay, these are the skills, and you can see what companies are saying they're looking for in these areas. So let's look at some of the gaps. This is a gap from that 2019 study with business ethics and down to the team player. But you can see the gaps there were pretty significant all the way through those top 10. So this is the 10 that they said they needed, but the light blue line underneath shows the gap. So 59%, almost 60% said they wanted or they needed and they were looking for business ethics. And then 32%, over half of those said that was a gap in their organization. This interpersonal skills, oral and written kind of things, again, 56%, but 20% said there was a gap in their organization. So they're looking for not only to augment, but probably to backfill and enhance and fill some gaps that are there. Relationship building in the 20%, whatever. And this one at the bottom really surprised me. 25% said that they had a 25% gap in the team player area. So almost 40% said that was number 10 on their list of top 10 skills, and they saw one of the biggest gaps, the second biggest gap of anything, 25% in their organization. So their effectiveness in getting team players is not good. So you have to say, is that a hiring thing? Is that a cultural thing? Is that why is that such a big gap? It begs a lot of questions. Here's a gap from this recent skill dynamics survey. Legal at the top, 29% saw a gap in their legal, which is not really surprising with the changes that there have been in some of the laws and that are expected to be there in terms of tariffs and all of those kinds of things. And then number 2, right behind it, digital and analytic type of skills. And then buying and merchandising on down, contract management, negotiation, inventory, all the way down. Sourcing is one of the lowest I've seen for a while, and down to 8%. Project management, very low here, 5% gap. So lots of different things, a longer list, almost twice as long as some of the other lists, about 20 things 5% and higher. So a lot of gaps to be filled in the corporate America. So closing the gaps is something that companies are struggling with, and anyone looking for a job or trying to retain their job, maintain their job, if and hiring managers are looking to say, how do we close these? So companies continue to struggle to attract top talent. They continue to struggle in updating their employee skills because you saw the huge numbers of gaps that they see in their organization. Those, only 32% effective, only 25% effectiveness in hiring for those skills, and they try to retain their star performers. And star performers get jobs in any environment, in any kind of economic situation, whether there's a lot of unemployment or very low unemployment, good people find jobs. So companies are trying to do that, and they're finding that some of the traditional methods aren't working. And one of the things I'm going to talk a little bit about is budgets and what companies are doing about this. And they're not identifying a lot of options for themselves. So if you're an individual who wants to either get a job or move up and get a promotion, get a better job, maybe that's within your company, maybe you're looking to go or you're open to go to another company to get a better job, a higher position. If you're a manager who says my staff is not as strong as it could be, should be, needs to be, then these are some things for you to think about. And from the overall company perspective and the senior management, they know they have goals, or they know they have gaps, and they are putting together goals to improve, but it's not getting the desired results because companies have been talking about this since before the pandemic, which is now almost 5 years ago. And so pre-COVID, there were challenges, and there are still challenges within that realm, and it's a lot of the same skills. So, who owns closing those gaps? This is something that I've always had to share, I've always had to emphasize, both as an employee myself and as a manager when I was in the corporate world and managing people. This responsibility for closing these gaps is shared. I've had employees who said, well, tell me what to do and I will do it. And I've had employees who said, I don't want to do what you want me to do. I'm not interested in taking that Excel class or this class or using um, Grammarly or any of those things. I would rather not do that. I had situations when I was a manager that I fought very hard with my manager to get budgets to send people to seminars and training workshops and different things. And then I had people who say, well, I don't really like to travel. I can't find anything here and if you can't find something here in LA, then that's pretty tough because there's a lot of things. And not wanting to travel is not often associated with a supply chain job, because the supply chain jobs I've had have been with a considerable amount of travel, and traveling to a seminar I always thought was a real treat. So it's just a different kind of mindset. But senior leadership support and sponsorship is definitely needed. And you can see from these surveys that these senior execs see that there are gaps. They understand that. They are the ones highlighting these gaps in their organizations. So it is their responsibility to find resources and find funding for closing those gaps. And that funding can be through upskilling, reskilling, additional people, augmenting people. It can be through training, bringing in wholesale training for the whole organization, or one or two key people get trained that come back, and with the stipulation that they should be the trainer, come back and train the rest of the team from what they learned. So the funding doesn't always have to be training. It can be hiring the right people, bringing in another manager, working with another organization to share resources For example, if you need financial skills, go talk to the financial department, the accounting, the controller's office, whatever, and see if they have people that can come over and work with your people on getting better financial skills, or put together some lunch and learn type things that are very inexpensive to do and gives, helps the working relationship between the organizations, gives the financial people a chance to show off what they can do in terms of putting together some presentations and training some people, and will upskill your people. So you need to think about what can be done. But it is senior leadership's job to provide resources and some funding to model these skills and behaviors so that you don't expect people to be team players when you're busy stabbing your colleague in the back in front of all of your team, and they see that that's the behavior you exhibit. And you also really have to prioritize these skills. You can look at these and say, there's 10 of these, there's 15 of these, there's whatever. You can't fix everything at once. You need to say, these are the 3 skills, maybe 5 skills that we're really looking at, but these are the ones we want to try to address first. These are the skills that we want to get more of or train on or whatever, however you prioritize it. But you can't say we're going to fix all our problems, because that's not going to happen. So looking at uh, ways to do gap analysis, you can do these through professional organizations. You can do these for online kinds of things. Companies have their own sometimes gap analysis. You can look at performance reviews and see what they say about people and how well they're doing. Again, look for in-house resources to borrow. Don't don't do just the easy thing and say, okay, we need data analytics. We need to get an Excel class. That might be the easy thing to do, and it might be necessary for some people, but don't think that sending somebody to one class is going to solve all your problems. There are lots of webinars, seminars, consultants. There are lots of ways to apply these learnings. I worked with a colleague. She was a former colleague of mine. She worked at Agilent, and I worked there for a while with her. When she was with Agilent, after I left, they did a training program with a lot of people all over the world, because Agilent has offices. Agilent, if you don't know, is a spin-off of HP, and they have quite a few people in lots of places. And they actually hired a trainer to go and do the same presentation to all of these buyers and their managers. And they gave the training, they gave the coaching. This is what you need to do. Bring your real life examples and whatever, did the program. And then they looked at the results 3 months and 6 months later. And what they found is that the organizations, the facilities, the sites where the manager took the training with their people and the manager held the people accountable to actually apply that learning in the workplace, they had very good results. In some cases where the manager did not even attend the training with their team
All
or
of that.
didn't follow up on that, then that was a very limited results and not much return on that investment of paying that person to come and fly all over the world and do all these things. So being able to apply the learnings is really, really important. So you have to not just say, here, take this webinar, seminar, whatever, but this is something that you need to bring back to the workplace and make sure that you can actually integrate it. So here's some things from the employee perspective. So I showed you at first what the managers are saying, right? And this says from the employees, what extent do you agree or disagree that you feel valued at your organization? So the light green is strongly agree, but it's kind of bad that only 47% of these people said that they feel valued at their organization. 33% said they somewhat agree, a not too much neutral, 5% somewhat disagree, and then 7% strongly disagree. But if you don't feel valued, that's the kind of people that don't stick around, because retention is a big part of feeling valued, feeling like you're contributing, and feeling like that you're respected in your job. These people said, my function is valued at my organization. 53% said yes, they strongly agree. 37% said they somewhat agree. So this one at least is over 50%, but there's 37% that said, yeah, some people value our function, but other people don't so much. So that's an interesting number. Training and development are a priority. Only 20% said strongly agree. 30% said somewhat agree, and 23% said they somewhat disagree. So they're getting heavier in that disagree with training and development being a priority, even though, again, the same managers are saying we have gaps. And then my organization invests sufficiently in my training and development. Only 15% said they strongly agree, and 28% neither agree nor disagree. That's the biggest. Well, that's not drawn that way, but somewhat agree is 28%. Neither agree or disagree is 28%. That's that middle one is kind of interesting. Does that mean that the employees don't care, or I don't know? But 20% disagreeing and 8% strongly disagreeing, that tells you there's probably some room for improvement. When we talk about retention, and one reason it's so important to look at the employee's perspective is we want to look at the retention piece. So um, they ask these employees, what, if anything, would make you want to stay or stay even more at your current organization? So 63% said salary, which is not a huge surprise. People always like money, although it is not the only thing that gets people to stay. 56%, well over half, said feeling valued within my team and the wider organization. So managers need to pay attention to that. If 56% said they would want to stay or stay more, even more, then that means there's a big opportunity to make these people feel valued. And it doesn't take a lot of time and money to make people feel valued and appreciated. The company culture itself was 47%, incentives 44%. Then there's the benefits package 30%. I know companies are asking employees to pay more of their insurance and that kind of thing, and so they're pinching on that. They're reducing um, pensions have been greatly reduced, and even contributions to 401ks and things. So that's an issue. Progression opportunities, 31%. So how do I get promoted? How do I get a better salary, right? That's one of the things that people really want to see, that road and how they can go from there. And then feeling confident in their ability to do their job. And if they don't have retention, if your company doesn't have retention and these things don't get fixed, here's what happens. So they ask the same people, what consequences of high employee turnover are you most concerned about? So again, a lot of the managers said loss of critical skills. So you complain that you don't have the skills and you're losing them because of retention problems, and you're not helping yourself by, trying to fix that problem. So it's a big issue. It's again a kind of an endless do loop if you don't figure out how to staunch that problem and get your retention rates up. Higher errors, low employee morale. Again, when good people leave, people miss them. You don't always miss the work, but you often miss the people that you work with. And so that affects employee morale when the company loses a good person. When you lose a good person, usually for some amount of time, unless it's a planned retirement or something, then you are understaffed for some amount of time because you can't backfill and replace people within a couple of weeks. So then you're understaffed at critical functions and people feel the pinch. They feel like they have to do more work and pick up that slack. Only 9% said they weren't concerned about consequences of turnover. And 9% said that there were recruitment costs, which were really high. So it, kind of goes all over the map, but I think there's some messages there. So here's some other factors. This one is one of the ones that I thought was really, really telling. So they ask again the same group, what, if anything, is the current budget for your function? So this is the fiscal year 23, 24, given that most companies don't have their 2025 budgets finalized yet, especially if they're on the calendar year. So 20% said less than 25%. 29% said we don't have a specific training budget. So that's 49% of these companies have little to no training budget. They have a preponderance of saying they need these skills, and yet there is no money targeted toward that, either less than 25% or no training budget. And then on top of that, another 31% said, I'm not sure. So if they said, I'm not sure, that means that they're not, they, they don't have much budget. If they're not familiar with that, then that's not a good sign. So that 20% plus 29 is 49. That's 80% right there of the people that they're asking, do you know about your training budget? It's either minuscule to none or I don't know, which tells me it's not going to be a couple $100,000 if they don't know that there's any budget there. So I don't know how this is going to change unless these dynamics change. And again, I said there's lots of ways to train people, but funding is a big part of that. So here's this. Now they ask if your organization was going to help you with training, what would you do? So the top and to the left says, how does your organization help you? 69% said we do on-the-job training. So you just learn as you go. 33% said there's in-person training. And only 16% have mentorship programs, and there's some other things in there. Then on the bottom, they said, how would you like your organization to help you with training to meet your job requirements? Then they said only 20% of the people said on the job training. So 20% of the people want on the job training, and 69% of the companies are relying on that to do their training. On the flip side, formal qualification and courses are what people are saying they want, what employees say they want. And that is only 28% of what companies say that they are actually providing. So there's a big gap there. Now, the in-person training is about a third for what employees want and what employees are getting. So that one is well matched, but the others, not so much. Companies don't provide much mentorship programs. 31% of the people said they would appreciate that they think that would help them. Standard e-learning, 22% of the people say they like that, and that's what companies are defaulting to. We're going to make this program, and that works fine for certain things. That works fine for some of the rote things that you have to do to take people through the things that they need to do. But not all the training, especially in supply chain, can be done from a standard e-learning kind of package. In-person training is a good way to do that. And on-the-job training is not answering the mail, is what I'm reading from this survey, that they're saying that 69% of the companies say, yeah, we just learned from the other people that work here. But if the other people that work here aren't trained or trained correctly or trained with enough depth and breadth, then you're not going to get that. And people are saying they would like more formal courses for that type of thing. And then how does your organization measure the success of training? This is another really hard thing to do. So you get you do a training program, whether you bring somebody in, you send people to a class, a workshop, you do a group kind of thing. I've worked for organizations where we all read the same book, and every week at staff meeting we spend 15 minutes talking about another chapter and what we are getting out of it, and how that we can apply that in our workspace and things like that. But how do you measure the success of training? So this was interesting. Most companies rely on performance improvement. So they're looking for actual improvement in the workspace, but they probably don't have the coaching and mentoring in place to make sure that whatever's learned in these trainings are actually applied and applied consistently back in the workplace. 33% says they ask the employee, what did you get out of that? And the same third, it's not the same third, but the same one third answer says we don't measure success of training. So no wonder companies don't want to put a lot of money into this when they don't have a measure of what am I getting back from that. So that's a tough thing to do. Anecdotal feedback can be there. Better client relationships, you see a little bit of that. And then if you're measuring the success of training by the number of hours people are doing it, you're probably missing the mark because that's probably not the best way to measure that. So there's a lot of different messages coming from these studies. So there's another study that was done about coaching. So the Human Capital Institute and the International Coach Federation said 78% of employees and 75% of executives in a different study said they value coaching. And yet, out of those employees and executives who three-quarters of them value coaching, only 24% of the companies actually report coaching as a part of their organization that they have in some formal kind of way to ensure that gets done. And 22% believe employees have equal opportunity for coaching. So your company might offer it, but only 22% of employees think that they probably have access to that. And coaching is a really good way to help and augment on-the-job training to show and demonstrate and make sure that you're applying things that you learn from external sources. So it's again, there's gaps in the workspace. This is another one. This one's a little bit older, but I like this because it talks about the learning and the actual what you're getting out of it. So if you attend a workshop, a webinar, online learning, or whatever, and you just do that, you get about 10% effectiveness from that. If you have a community to practice that in, some subject matter networks, you've got some coaching and mentoring along with that, that retention and that effectiveness doubles to 20%. If you have action learning and problem solving and real life kind of experiences and job rotations, shadowing and follow up from that, your workplace integration of that learning goes up to 70%. So companies may be spending money on workshops and webinars, but if you're not putting in that after the fact effort to make sure it gets integrated, then you're missing a lot of the benefit from that. So companies need to rethink this. And as an employee, you need to think about what you need, what you want, and how you can get that. So what I know for sure is the need for these additional upgraded skills is going to continue. You own part of that. So own your own contribution to getting your skills upgraded, honed, stay on top of those. Think about polishing your own rough edges because we all have those. Any of these skills, nobody has great skills at all of these, all 10 of these, 15 of them, whatever. So think about the ones where you have some rough edges and figure out how you can polish that. It's interesting to me that the interpersonal relationships and the oral and the written communication always are high, one or two in the need and in the gap area. And those things you can polish. So you can seek access to training inside the workplace, whatever you have, mentorships, formal or informal, on the job training. You can look for certifications, workshops, webinars, whatever. You can ask for funds from your employer. or other sources. You can ask for partial assistance. You can ask to be reimbursed if you complete a program. There's different ways to do that. I always tell people, do not ask in your team meeting, hey, do we pay for, a certification program? No, this is a one-on-one with your manager when you are in there prepared to say, this is how much it's going to cost. This is what I'm going to benefit from that. This is what the company's going to benefit from that. And I would like to get assistance with paying for this. Partial assistance is fine. If they'll pay for part of it, then that's better than nothing. But there are lots of ways to do this. Research, read, listen, internet searches, articles, books, podcasts, audiobooks, audio articles, all that. You've got to be a little bit creative, either as an employee or as a manager, because these resources are not plentiful. So think about where you can get the resources. Make sure you look for coaches, reinforcement as an employee. Make sure as a manager you're doing these things and keep that encouragement up. And you need to make these processes for learning as part of the routine of your workforce, because this need is not going to go away. It is just not going to change that much in the next few years. We all have to keep learning. So this is my supplier model. What I talked about today is all in this bottom corner. That's the business fundamentals, because I made this model to show that you need to manage suppliers and be part of purchasing and supply chain. You need supplier performance, supplier relationships, and you need risk management. But you have to have people with the right skills that can do those things. Because if you can't, if your team doesn't have the right skills, you're not able to execute and manage the other quadrants, and then you're not going to achieve the results that you can achieve and that you should be achieving. And budgets aren't huge, so you need to be creative. So my calendar is open. There's a lot of upskilling and reskilling going on, and it's going to be ongoing. If your talent pool isn't deep enough, if you're looking for what you need to do in 2025, this is a great time to go ask for budget for your department. Put that in there for the 2025 budget. If you need assistance, help is available. So you can ask. I'm happy to do a 30-minute call for free with you to talk about what your plans are, what your needs are, your gap analysis, how you want to go forward with that. So you can schedule a free call with me at callwithjane.com. We can talk about what you're doing, suss out another plan, and talk about what you might be able to do to go forward. So this is our dynamic dialogue. We're going to continue again in January. So our next webinar will be January 28th. I think we're going to do 2025 look ahead, but that's a couple months away, so I can change my mind. I've also been toying with looking again at a deep dive into Israel and Ukraine and those awful activities that are going there and what they're doing to industries and supply chains. I have a CPSM certification class. I have one ongoing now that is going to finish in the early Q1. So we're going to start exam 2 sometime in Q1 for 2025. You can look at our events, and please maybe don't do that because my website is so out of date. But you can contact me directly at Jane@Purple Ink. So those of you who have attended these before know that I close with a slide, and it's my strive to thrive. And this one I've used before, but I like this because there's two people talking, and one says, "What happens if we invest in developing our people and then they leave us?" And I like the response because they say, "What happens if we don't and they stay?" So that isn't going to change that. And the other one I like, I'm a big Einstein fan, and this is attributed to Einstein, but I'm not sure that he actually said this, but it's attributed to him to say, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So if you're not doing something different with your training, then these numbers are not going to move, and you're going to see the same kinds of things for the next few years in gaps and in needed skills. And that's not a good thing for you. That's not a good thing for your company. So don't just try to do the same thing over and over and over. So that's what I have for you today. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to turn my video back on.